listed at 6'7", 320.
Much bigger than that. He made a big block there, and Moss buys a little time. Hudson into traffic. Did he pull that down? Kyron Hudson. Rush for Wegman back pedaling. Trying to stay alive, and he can't. He'll be sacked by Howard Cross the third. One of those.
Ready to call, doing the routine.
Arch Manning steps up, pumps, flips it out,
Week 1 is almost in the books as we've got one more game left to go, but I'm still going to do the Week 1 review. Hi, everybody. You're listening to the College Sports Superfan, and so far, Week 1 absolutely has delivered with lots of crazy performances and insane matchups. First, I'm just going to get into my prediction record. I'm just going to get this out of the way here. My prediction record for Week 1, well, and including Week 0, was 4-5. So far off to a losing record. Hopefully, I'll get better as the season goes on. My best prediction win was the Miami Hurricanes over the Florida Gators. I had that one pretty spot on, and the line was really close for that one. So I feel better about that prediction win than, say, Penn State over West Virginia, Colorado, or over North Dakota State, for example, because that spread was just a little bit bigger. Georgia over Clemson. I think almost everybody had that one. So my best prediction win was Miami over Florida. My worst loss, though, definitely was Coastal Carolina beating the absolute crap out of Jacksonville State. I thought that was going to be the opposite. So I was way wrong on that one. But currently, 4-5. Georgia Tech's upset over Florida State is a big reason why. But I got a prediction to make at the end of the video that hopefully will get me back to 500. And then, of course, I'll have more predictions of games throughout the week, which I'll get into at the very end. First, let's go over what happened in this Week 1. The first thing I wanted to talk about was Oregon. What the heck happened to the Oregon Ducks? They're playing the Idaho Vandals, and yes, I get it. Idaho is a really good FCS team, but you look at how Oklahoma State handled the number 1 ranked FCS team in South Dakota State, and Oklahoma State's only number 17 in the country. And then you look at the number 3 team, Oregon, at home against Idaho, and they were struggling offensively throughout the game. We did learn a lot of things about the Ducks, though. They have a lot of weapons. They have a lot of playmakers, and Dillon Gabriel is a solid quarterback. But the offensive line did not look impressive for Oregon, which needs to vastly improve to play in the Big Ten, where there's a lot of very, very good defenses. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. So many good defenses. You have to improve on the offensive line to have the season that we think that they're capable of having. But it did show that Gabriel was a good quarterback. He's got weapons, Tez Johnson, Terrence Ferguson at tight end, and then he's got a couple great running backs, Jordan James, Noah Whittington. There's playmakers on this team, but the Lions just got to give Gabriel a little bit more time. We'll have to see how they do against a much better opponent in Boise State for this upcoming week, which they had an interesting game as well, a shootout against Georgia Southern. I'll just talk about that one next, where Ashton Jeanty had 6 touchdowns in the game. I knew he was going to be a great running back this season, but that was just incredible. He might end up becoming one of the best running backs of the year, but it's interesting as well. Boise ended up in a shootout like that. Overall, though, that's going to set up a very fascinating Week 2 matchup against Oregon. I'm actually not going to be having a video for that one. I've already got my 5, which I'll say at the end of this video of the games that I'm going to be previewing for Week 2. The Oregon-Boise State game was kind of on the edge, and I know for this past week I made 6 prediction videos, but I'm going to try to keep it at around 4 or 5 to make them more special, like individual games. And the Boise State-Oregon game just barely did not make the cut of those 5 games that I think are the most intriguing for Week 2. But overall, I think Oregon is going to win that game. I'll just say that right now. I'm not counting that in my predictions, but I'm just going to say Oregon's going to win that game. But that could set up a very interesting flash for sure. All right, let's move on to some of the other games here. Georgia, Clemson. This is another one everybody's been talking about because Clemson got absolutely obliterated. It was close in the first half, 6-0 at halftime. It's like, okay, the Tigers' defense is elite. Georgia's defense is elite. This is very reminiscent of the 2021 game that I talked about in my Georgia Clemson preview video. But at the end of the day, Clemson just offensively is struggling so much, and I just don't understand why. Meanwhile, Georgia, they got their groove. They started to look comfortable. Carson Beck was in control of the game. He had a solid 278 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the running back room, so this is the big thing everybody was looking at for Georgia because Trevor Etienne, there's something going on there, and he wasn't eligible to play in this first game. And then you had the news about one of their other running backs getting injured. So you're thinking, okay, maybe Branson Robinson's going to be the starting running back. Maybe Cash Jones is going to get a lot of looks. Instead, it was Nate Frazier, 83 yards and a touchdown as a true freshman for this Georgia offense. He could be the starting back for the rest of the season, or at least until Trevor Etienne comes back, and then he could be the number 2 back. But the potential there to do that against a really good defense as a true freshman in your first game is insane. And he wasn't the only freshman playmaker that had a amazing week 1. We'll get into some more of those, like for instance, Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State. So I had mentioned before Ellis Robinson was the number 1 recruit in a previous class. Jeremiah Smith was the number 1 overall recruit in this entire freshman class coming in to this season. And he showed you exactly why. 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. I was looking over the film against Akron, and his route running was so good. His possession was fantastic. He could match up with some of these bigger corners, I think, and managed to get away and get space. And he's got a quarterback in Will Howard who showed a lot of impressiveness in that game. Again, that's just his first game as a Buckeye, so you got to keep that in mind. But I think Howard does look like an improvement over Kyle McCord, at least for Ohio State. And let's talk quickly about, I just wanted to say before we move on to some other things, the Clemson team as a whole. All hope is not lost for the Tigers. I know a lot of people are going to overreact to this game and say, oh, Clemson's over, their dynasty is done, everything is all over. But I believe that Clemson does have the potential to bounce back. The ACC is not that strong. In my opinion, it is the weakest of the 4 Power 4 conferences. And we've seen before Georgia or Alabama, even in the past, play a team in a neutral site like Atlanta and absolutely obliterate them. Georgia did this to Oregon just 2 years ago in Dan Lanning's first career game as head coach. And then look at what Oregon has done since then. After that massive blowout, and people said, oh, Oregon can't even compete with the SEC. They're nowhere good enough. The rest of that season, they turned things around and were great. And then last season, they were so close to the college football playoff. Once again, the 4-team playoff. And if it wasn't for Washington, they would have been the team that was in there. So all hope is not lost for Clemson. Losing this badly does not mean that it's time to give up on this team, but definitely there's a lot of improvement still to be made. I think the O-line needs to improve a lot. I think Dabo Sweeney does need to get with the times, use the transfer portal a little bit. It's just the way that it is. You can't be using a flip phone in the age of smartphones. So he's just got to figure that out and get back with it. Let's talk about some of the other games here. Tennessee playing Chattanooga. They absolutely obliterated them 69-3, and Nico Yamalieva was fantastic. 314 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half. He didn't play at all the rest of the game. There was no need. He had the school record for yards and a half, and his passing so crisp. And we'll get more into Tennessee, talking about them later on this week because they'll be in one of my preview videos. But I just want to throw out there, this is their biggest opening season win since 1936. Let's talk about a few others. Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas, all 3 of those SEC teams absolutely obliterate their teams as well. And the reason why I bring up all these teams and why I talked about Oregon first is because I do believe Oregon should slide in the AP poll when it comes out. They're currently number 3, but I got to be honest, looking at how well Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss all played, I really think all 3 of them should jump ahead of Oregon. I really think it should be Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, Oregon, and number 6. And they could easily move back up. I mean, they could dominate Boise State, and then I could change my mind and they can move right back up into the top 5, maybe even the top 4. But to play the way they did against Idaho, I just don't think they deserve to be number 3 anymore, especially when you see how much. I mean, Western Kentucky's a good team. They're probably going to win 8 or 9 games this season, even despite this loss to Alabama, and they destroyed them 63 to nothing. Colorado State, they were expected to be a decently good team this year, maybe win 6, 7 games in the Mountain West Conference, and Texas obliterated Colorado State. And then Ole Miss obliterated an FCS team in Furman, but that's a lot more impressive than Oregon's performance against an FCS team. So all of those teams, I think, should move up. The Texas running back situation becomes a little bit more clear. We'll talk more about them later in the week, but Jarrett Gibson and Jaden Blue, those two look like they could be the lead backs for Texas. When it comes to Alabama, transfer Keon Sabb, who just transferred in from Michigan, had 2 interceptions, and freshman Ryan Williams led the team in receiving with 2 catches for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns. So the 2 times he touched the ball, he made magic happen. So these newcomers to this Alabama team already kind of making them look like the old Alabama team. Penn State, super impressive win over West Virginia. Drew Aller, 216 yards, 3 touchdowns, hardly any incompletions. Harrison Wallace, 117 yards and 2 touchdowns. Michigan fans were very irate that Penn State was ranked number 8 and they were ranked number 9. And they said, hold on a second. We've been beating Penn State the last couple of years. We should be ranked ahead of them. Well, you look at how this first week went, I think the ranking is absolutely accurate. West Virginia was a really good team. Penn State went on the road, had to get stuck in a massive weather delay, and then dominated them. Absolutely dominated them. And Drew Aller had one of his more complete games that I've seen from him, and I think he's set up for a monster season as the receiving core has gotten much better. Against Harrison Wallace was the main guy. He's got Tyler Warren. He's got Julian Fleming if he can live up to his potential, plus the backfield of Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Really, really good Penn State offense. And with Tom Allen as the defensive coordinator, this Penn State defense is going to be just fine. I think they're going to be national championship contenders throughout the season. Michigan, and we'll talk more about Michigan because I'll have a separate thing about them, but they pulled away from Fresno State and won 30 to 10, but there certainly was some concerns though. It's the quarterback situation, not exactly clear. It's a battle between 2 QBs and neither one of them looked all that impressive, and they have a huge matchup. In fact, the game of the week in week 2 in their own stadium. So that has to be figured out. The running back room, that looked good. Donovan Edwards was a really great running back. And then Mullings, fantastic short yardage running back. And then Colston Loveland, he was like a cheat code as a receiver. The tight end receiver hybrid might be the number 1 tight end in the country with the way he played against Fresno. And the defense, amazing. Will Johnson had one of the best pick sixes I've ever seen. And I'll have a video clip of that for that separate preview video. All right, let's get into some of these other things. NC State, they struggled mightily against Western Carolina. I'll have a separate thing about them for later in this week, but they may even drop out of the top 25 after the way they played and because of Georgia Tech's upset in week 0. Dylan Raiola, another one of those freshmen that looked amazing in week 1. Looked great against UTEP, 238 yards, 2 touchdowns. The Patrick Mahomes lookalike and copycat showed a lot of potential. Now, Isaiah Nayor had 121 yards and a touchdown. He's moved all over the place. He was at Wyoming, then he was at Texas, and he didn't get a whole lot of playing time at Texas, and then now he's at Nebraska, and I'm pulling for him because I think he is a good receiver. And I think he's set up to have a really great year with the Cornhuskers. Tataroa McMillan, oh my gosh. That he is the best wide receiver in the whole country. I think Travis Hunter is the number one player in the country because of what he does on defense and offense. But McMillan, I think, is the best wide receiver. He's so. I mean, I'll have some video clips here to show you guys here, but his route running is so good. I don't know how he's this wide open over and over and over again, and he catches everything and the fact that him and Noah Fafita are just in sync. They are the best duo in this country, and he's the best wide receiver in the country. And then Colorado, fantastic game against North Dakota State. Shador Sanders, Jimmy Horn doing their thing, and then Travis Hunter, unreal. He is the best player in all of college football. I strongly, strongly believe that. Vanderbilt, how about the Commodores winning a thriller over Virginia Tech? That was insane, insane game. Who knew that was going to be arguably one of the best games of the week? Vanderbilt led 17 to nothing. Virginia Tech comes all the way back. They take the lead. All of a sudden, Vanderbilt, they managed to win right at the end of the game in overtime. Amazing, amazing performance to see. And so who knows, Vanderbilt may, just may, have a chance to go bowling this season after all, especially when you consider how poor South Carolina looked this season and the fact that Vanderbilt's going to be able to play them. There may be a chance to get that as a conference win, plus win these other non-conference games. They might just reach 6 wins after all. It's not completely out of the cards anymore. And Virginia Tech, they might not be as impressive as people thought they were. How about impressive, though? Notre Dame and Miami. After their massive wins on the road against SEC teams, here's the funny thing. Now that the television rights have changed over, the SEC is now on ABC as opposed to CBS, and now the CBS game at 3:30 Eastern time is now with the Big Ten. So the SEC had its first SEC on ABC games, and they lost both of them. The Florida Gators lost to Miami, and Texas A&M lost to Notre Dame. And then even last night, as I'm recording this, LSU lost to USC on ABC there. So I don't know if there's something cursed about that, but that's the trend that we see so far right now. It's a little cursed, but Notre Dame and Miami are set up for massive, massive seasons. You look at their schedules; these were some of the toughest games on their schedules, and Miami just obliterated Florida. I was spot on about that one. The Gators are not that good this year. Their schedule is really tough. They're gonna have maybe one of their worst seasons of all time. I don't think it's unrealistic to see them go 3-9 or 4-8 this season. I really don't. I think it's gonna be bad. Miami, though, they legitimately should win at least 10 games, at least, and have a strong chance to make it to the college football playoff because you look at the ACC, Clemson didn't look that great. Florida State's already got a loss. SMU, tricky to figure out so far. It's wide open for Miami to go in there, win the ACC championship, and then get into the college football playoff as a top four team. It's not unrealistic to think that that could happen for the Hurricanes. And then you look at Notre Dame, their schedule, as usual, of course, lines up so, so well. They only have two more true road games the rest of the season. They go on the road to play Purdue, who's going through a major rebuild with Ryan Walters as head coach. They're not going to be all that great this season. And then they go on the road at the end of the season to play USC, which we'll talk about USC in just a second. But that's it. That's their only other two true road games the rest of the year. They've got some neutral site games coming up, and then the other games are all home games. So talk about a really favorable schedule for Notre Dame. They should definitely also win at least 10 games. If Miami and Notre Dame both don't win at least 10 games based on what they've done this first week of the season, I'd say that's a major disappointment. Now let's talk about USC and LSU as we're almost done wrapping up here. USC, what a thriller win over LSU. I knew this one was going to be a thriller. I said in my preview it might be one of the most fun games of week one, but I didn't think it was going to go like this. There were some amazing offensive plays, but it was the defense that shined. D'Anton Lynn, now the defensive coordinator with USC. Blake Baker, now the defensive coordinator with LSU. Both teams showed huge improvements, but the big difference in this game last night was mental mistakes that LSU made. It seemed like the same thing LSU did the last couple of years against Florida State in their opening games. For whatever reason, with Brian Kelly as head coach, they just can't start out the right way because they are just making mental mistakes. Twice during the game, the defensive line got a delay of game penalty for movement to try to throw off the offensive line. That was just a couple examples of all the many ways that LSU really bumbled this game, and USC was able to win a close one. Very impressive receiving group by USC. I talked about in my preview video for them. Miller Moss is going to have an insane season. He looks really good, really comfortable as a player there. And he's able to get the ball out so quickly under pressure, too. I mean, there's one throw he made. The guy is literally snaps ball, guys in his face, and he throws it. Amazing play. I mean, he's able to don't pressure Miller Moss because he's going to beat you on that. He's got the receivers that are able to beat you. And Kyron Hudson, one of the best one-handed catches I've ever seen. I think just about almost anybody's ever seen that you saw in the opening of this video right here. And then on top of that, he made the game-winning catch, basically making another one-handed catch and suffering helmet-to-helmet contact, targeting, puts USC right down the field, and they're able to score the winning rushing touchdown with former Mississippi State running back Woody Marks getting revenge over one of his former team's arch rivals in LSU. You can't, make that stuff up. It just worked out beautifully. All right, last couple of things, then we'll be done here. Boston College and Florida State play tonight. So I'm making this recording before they're playing. By the time I upload this video, the game might already be going on. But oh well, I'll make my prediction here. I'm 4-5 so far on the season. So Florida State, I trusted you once before. You let me down. I'm gonna trust you again. So fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Hopefully you won't fool me twice. I got Florida State beating Boston College by 10 at home tonight. Hopefully that'll get me back to 500. And then here are the five predictions I've got for the rest of the week here. We've got South Carolina at Kentucky, an SEC game on ABC. And they're both SEC teams, so neither one of them can be cursed in this outcome. Also, the Cy-Hawk rivalry between Iowa and Iowa State, always an amazing rivalry game, so got to get into that one. Colorado at Nebraska, super epic rivalry game that goes back for many years. I think this one's going to be an amazing one. It could go either way, so I can't wait to predict that one. Tennessee versus NC State in Charlotte. It's in Charlotte, but it might be an even turnout by both fans. Who knows? Maybe even Tennessee could have even some more fans. We'll see how NC State bounces back and see if Tennessee can keep things rolling. And then the game of the week in the Big House, Texas at Michigan. This is going to be such an amazing game. I can't wait to predict this one. It's going to be a top 10 matchup. Again, in my opinion, Texas should move up to number 3. I think Michigan should stay right where they are at number 9. But we'll see what actually comes out in the AP poll in the next couple of days. That is it, guys. The week 1 review. We'll have more videos coming out throughout the week. Those are the 5 videos that are going to come out, and I cannot wait for week 2. It's going to be really, really good. And based on what we've seen from week 1 with the 12-team college football playoff, we're set up for one wild, unpredictable, crazy season. Thank you guys so much for listening to the College Sports Superfan, and let's get hyped.